Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to Pets of Politics with Mr. Watson. I am your host, Christian Watson, and today I have with me a very special guest, a former presidential contender, former congressman, Mr. Joe Walsh. He's someone who has been in the political conversation for a very, very long time, and I wanted to bring him on today because I wanted to talk about his position in relationship to gun control and perhaps some other issues as well as we continue our conversation. But I have a policy on this show. I prefer when guests introduce themselves and tell us about themselves. So, Joe, tell us about yourself a little bit before we get started.
Hey, Christian, first off, thanks for being with you. I appreciate it. I always love the chance to speak to interesting, engaging, politically aware people. Look, I'm a former congressman. I did run for president against Trump. I never had much of a shot. I'm generally a free market libertarian, kind of a Tea Party guy. That's still who I am. I left the Republican Party 2.5 years ago because this Republican Party is an authoritarian embracing cult that no longer believes in democracy. So right now I'm with you, still kind of the same guy, though I'm probably a little bit more woke than I used to be, Christian. But I'm politically homeless these days.
A lot of people have that sentiment of being politically homeless. But I always wondered what that actually means. For a lot of folks, they think it means that they don't have a party they belong to. But in my opinion, if you have an underlying value system, an underlying set of values, then you're not politically homeless. You just don't have a party. You know what your political values are, and you know how to enact them. And I think it's a matter of expectation too, right? A lot of people expect too much out of the party system, right? Political parties, as I'm sure you know, as being a congressman for a long time, are dictated by private interests. They're dictated by the few who hold power within those structures who are able to leverage policy, whether that be the party whips, whether that be the majority leader or the minority leader, whether that be the national committee people of the respective parties and whoever's on the highest committees of the national committee. These are all private interests of people who may not reflect the entire base of the party. You saw this with Bernie Sanders in the Democratic primary of 2006, 2016, 15, when the leads of the party basically just shut him out. They intended to do this with Trump. They tried to do it, but they didn't do it very well. If they would have been smart enough, they would have probably just told everyone to drop out and ran Kasich and Cruz and then tried to split the vote that way. They didn't do that. So isn't it really just a matter of, overestimating the political system, this politically homeless stuff?
Well, no, though I agree with your broader point. I said 10 years ago when I was in Congress that we are at the onset of like a third American Revolution, the Civil War being the second American Revolution. I think we're at a moment, Christian, where our political system is broken. Both parties suck. And we are going to bump our way, I think, into major reform, big reforms, because our political system right now just simply isn't where the people want it to be. Now, a lot of this, Christian, is the people's fault because too many of the people for too damn long are lazy and don't vote and don't get involved. My hope is that people are waking up, and I think Trump helped to wake people up because he's so horrible. But you got it right. Look, in 16, Christian, I still believe if Bernie Sanders is the Democrat nominee, I think he beats Trump. Bernie and Trump back then, Christian, they weren't Republicans or Democrats, and they were the two most popular figures in America, political figures in America. So yeah, we're going through big change, which is important and necessary. I think you'll see a third or a fourth party within the next 8 years. But right now, when I say politically homeless, I mean, I got my beliefs, but my beliefs are not with a group of people ready to form a movement to do something yet.
Interesting. Well, and this kind of gives us a nice segue into the topic of today's video. I was astonished when I saw you announce your support for Mr. Hogg's March for Our Lives 2.0. I was astonished.
You should have been. I was.
Yeah. And as many people have pointed out, this is a stark departure from just where you were in 2018, when after the Parkland shooting, you said that gun laws would not have prevented this. But if I may read a tweet that you made in response to Mr. Hogg when he said in May, let's make this time different after the Uvalde shooting, I believe. You said, I am a gun owner and a big gun rights advocate. I met David Hogg this week. We had a great conversation. We disagreed more than we agreed, but I'll be marching with David and everyone else on June 11th because we need to come together and try to work together to fix this. So, I suppose
what the hell happened, Joe? What?
Sure, we could start there, but I'm more interested. What about Mr. Hogg's message, which hasn't changed over the past 4 years? What about his message appeals to you now, where it didn't then?
Two things, and it's less his message because I love David personally, and he and I have gotten to know each other. We've broken bread a few times, but I still disagree with most of the vast majority of what he advocates. Mm-hmm. It's important, Christian, because of what I've gone through, so many people think I've dramatically changed. I'm still the same Second Amendment guy I was 8 to 10 years ago. That tweet after Parkland in 18, I generally still have that position. I don't believe another new gun law is going to stop this epidemic of mass shootings. I still generally believe that, but Christian, we still should try to do everything we can do. So I guess that's where I've changed. And the final point I'll make is the big gun rights guy I am, a self-described gun nut, who's been very public about where I am on guns. I think we as a country do a shitty job up front before a gun is bought to make sure that a guy who shouldn't get a gun doesn't get a gun. My eyes have opened up a bit on that. We need to do better. And in talking to David Hogg a couple months ago, and he and I are trying to figure out where we can find some common ground, it really came down to that. Let's beef up background checks. Let's put some teeth into red flag laws, which was all kind of, part of the bill that Biden signed into law.
Yeah.
But that's where, David, that's where my bias has always been.
Yeah.
A gun owner that I am, 99.9% of all gun owners in this country are responsible, law-abiding gun owners, but they all aren't. And so our focus should be, we're not going to get rid of guns from that 99.9%. Our focus should be up front before a gun is bought. There's more that we can do. Okay.
That is a position that it's understandable. But in the light of recent events, it doesn't seem tenable to me. The Uvalde shooter had no history. Well, he had history, but not history that his family was willing to come before anyone and disclose. He had no criminal background, no evident history of mental health or anything of that sort. And even if he did have a history of mental health evaluation, I'm not sure that's a valid criteria to exclude people from buying guns. I think that psychiatry over the past few decades has been used to treat people with mental health issues as second-class citizens. And I don't think that we should perpetuate that by trying to deprive them from the natural right to defend themselves. So I just don't know exactly.
And by the way, Christian, fair point. There may have been personal red flags, figuratively speaking, in that kid's life. But then I look at the Highland Park, Illinois shooting, my home state of Illinois, right off of my congressional district. Right. Illinois has a very strict red flag law that was not followed. So you're right, though, man. That's not going to catch anything. Yeah. I mean, if a bad guy wants to get his hands on a gun in America and do bad things, it's almost impossible to stop that. There's I can't deny that, Christian.
Yeah. And not only that, but the Highland Park, Illinois shooting, he was aided and abetted by his family. I mean, you had the several
Completely.
incidences where he was threatening to kill them. He had a bunch of knives. He was creating music videos we talked about where he did mock mass shootings, and he talked
Yes.
about how everything is meaningless. I mean, there were so many different sides. But if the family was not willing to step up and actually confront their family members' clear, disturbed nature, then unfortunately the law can't really do much. And I think here's my problem with the gun control movement. They
Well,
try to
by the way, Christian,
please.
before you start that, let me just
Yeah.
jump in quickly. You're
Yeah.
right, everything you say about the family.
Yeah.
But remember, in September of 29, Highland Park Police is called to his home
Yep.
because he's threatening to kill everybody.
Mhm.
They remove a bunch of knives and a sword. 3 months later, that kid goes and applies for his firearm registration card,
Mhm.
which enables in Illinois him to then get a firearm.
Mhm.
The dad co-signs his application. That's a problem.
Mhm.
But that incident 3 months earlier,
Mhm.
where he threatened to kill everybody and they removed his knives, that was never transferred and given to the state police, in which case the state police could have denied his registration, his
But
firearm
yeah,
registration.
the family didn't want to pursue it. And this is, again, this kind of goes back to the fundamental problem with the gun control movement. They try to substitute value systems with law, right? And as someone who's
Mhm.
libertarian minded, you know, Joe, that laws are simply force. They are the attempt to leverage coercion to a desired end. And
Completely.
force is a matter of negation, right? It's good at stopping things. It's not really good at creating things if you look at it on a philosophical level. And no matter how many laws you pass, you cannot, no law can substitute for a comprehensive value system. Most people who have a good value system would have said, if their kid was threatening to kill them in anything, they would have said, you know what, this is a situation that is way beyond anything, that's way beyond the pale. This has to be corrected. You have to go to juvenile detention. You have to go to some kind of facility. And that's what would have happened. There are thousands of adolescents who go to those kind of institutions precisely for these kind of crimes all the time. And unfortunately, a lot of parents and families blame themselves for the actions of their family members when it comes to that. But regardless, that's what happens. And in many instances, corrective behavior can be ensured. And if it can't, then that's an entirely different situation. But a law is not a substitute for that. And I think what we have to do is really try to cultivate good value systems. Now, the government can't do that either. Government doesn't have the ability to do that either, because again, government is force. So I think that it is incumbent upon us as people who live and breathe in society to go ahead and try to do it, whether it be through certain initiatives, whether it be through offering voluntary gun safety classes to certain communities where gun violence is prevalent. There are plenty of things that individuals can do in a voluntary and peaceful fashion to try to affect the use of guns, but laws and barriers don't do it.
Christian, completely. And I agree completely. And I am a small L libertarian. Every time a Uvalde or a Highland Park happens, the cry on the left, well-intentioned, is we need a law to stop it. And there is not a law that is going to stop this. America has always had way, way, way more guns than any other country in the world.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
We haven't had this thing called mass shootings really until the last 20 to 30 years. So as you say, something else is going on. A law can't stop it. But I still think we can try to do whatever we can on the margins before a gun is bought to try to keep guns out of the hands of some of these people, even if it can, maybe stop one or two potentials. That's all.
Yeah. And the thing is, though, if you look at the past decade, the 2010s are probably pretty notorious for the rise of the gun control conversation again. Obviously, when Columbine happened, that's when a lot of the conversation kicked off. Then Michael Moore made his documentary, kicked off after that. But the 2010s with Sandy Hook and Aurora, Colorado, and all these different events. I remember watching Piers Morgan when I was much, much younger on TV all the time, talking about this kind of stuff. So that's when the conversation really ignited. And in a lot of those cases, it was a case of negligence on the part of the people who the shooters were living with. They didn't lock up their guns. They didn't make sure they were safe and things of that sort as well. So I understand doing something on the margins, but part of me believes that doing something on the margins is simply a placebo that we can use to say we're doing something, even if in X amount of cases, it will have virtually no impact at all. And so as a matter of practicality, would it be good to do something and be ineffective, or do nothing at all in that sense and pursue a different line of action? Because I think the dichotomy is always we have to either pass a law or nothing gets done. No, that's not how society works. Society is not built off of coercion, it's built off of cooperation. And in instances where it is built off of coercion, things tend to fall apart, right? People, well, and there's exceptions to this, obviously, like taxation. Most people learn to live with taxation, even if they don't like it. But still, they are accepting that as a reality, right? If every American got up in some hypothetical universe and said no more taxation, the country would collapse. There would be a massive revolution. But in most cases, society is not built off of coercion. So what non-coercive measures can we take to tackle this issue?
Well, two things. On the coercion side, the gun rights gun nut guy I am, I have no problem with anybody in this country who wants to get their hands on a gun to go through a pretty extensive background check. Again, that is coercion, but I have no problem with that. I have no problem with 18 to 20-year-olds, 22-year-olds, maybe going through a bit more of a background check. I personally have a bunch of guns. A lot of these states like Texas, that issue in Indiana just did as well, permitless guns. You can just go in and get a gun without any kind of training, any kind of anything. The problem, I wish that people who were buying guns went through some proper training and the proper background check. That's not going to happen in every state. So again, I'm not, man, my friend, I am where you are, in that very little can be done.
Yeah.
And again, the folks on the left believe a law can fix this when we have 39,000 some gun laws on the books.
Yeah.
Doing something about this that has nothing to do with guns, that's tougher stuff.
Yeah.
That then goes to family. That then goes to mental health. That then goes to communities paying attention to each other. Mm-hmm. That then goes to violence again. The MO of a lot of these mass shooters is pretty damn fucking identical, right? Mm-hmm. Typically young, lonely, bullied white kid. What's going on, America? But see, that's less tangible, Christian, to address stuff like that. It's much more tangible to say, get rid of that gun.
Yeah, well, tangible. And that's the problem. Again, we have
that's the problem. That's the problem.
Well, the way we frame it is particularly the problem, right? Tangible, right? Because if a law is passed or some kind of legislation is pursued, in the minds of most people, that means something has been completed, something has been done. But what they don't realize is that laws are enforced by the government, and by an extension, the administrative state, bureaucracy. So in this sense, the ATF, things of that sort. And the government isn't a laborsome, inefficient machine.
And Christian, you know what else they don't understand? You pass a law, generally good people obey that law. Mm-hmm. Criminals don't obey that.
Correct.
Law.
Yes.
So, hello.
But the March for Our Lives agenda does include a lot of, I mean, they're walking on false, but I'm not trying to insult Mr. Hogg here. I have nothing against David Hogg. I don't like his positions, but he seems like a fine person. But but as far as his positions go, I know that he constantly touts the line about assault weapons. As a gun owner, you understand that that is a false distinction. There's no such. I mean, my phone could be an assault weapon if I wanted to. If I wanted to.
Agreed.
I mean, assault is
Agreed.
a action, not a quality.
Agreed. Yeah.
They talk about high capacity magazines. Again, I have looked at data from the Rand Corporation and from other people. Even if you ban them in certain states, there is an inclusive effect on homicide rates with guns. Because a lot of gun homicides are not committed with AR-15s. In fact, I think there was a study that looked at gun homicides between 2007 and 2017, 0.2524%, according to the FBI Uniform Crime Statistics, say that of those crimes were committed by AR-15. Most gun homicides are not committed by that.
Christian, even the vast majority of mass shootings in this country are committed with handguns. Yeah.
Well, mass shootings is a very slippery definition too, right?
It
3
is.
or more. I mean, if Chicago has a mass shooting every day, you want to use that definition. I mean, these are trigger words, Joe. These are trigger words that people are using to tap into emotions, and it disconnects them from reality, and then that makes them think that legislation can fix this. And that's why I was surprised, because you know this as well as I do. Most political debates are not framed on the solid foundation of logic and truth. Most are framed on our emotions. And in a country like ours, built upon the idea of natural law, of natural rights, objective morality, objective truth, for our political system to be operating on the basis of emotion and passion, that is a dangerous prospect. That's a hugely dangerous prospect.
Christian, agreed. And it's always been that way. Look,
it has, unfortunately. You're right.
You and I are probably almost identical in our beliefs on this issue. I disagree with 97 or 8% of what David Hogg and the March for Our Lives folks want to do. Here's what I believe. As a responsible gun owner, I think responsible gun owners need to begin to have a say. I left the NRA 5 years ago. Internally, I think it's a fucking corrupt organization. Why anybody gives the NRA money, I don't know. But that aside, the NRA won't even open the door to any potential reform. I think most responsible gun owners are willing to look at, again, reforming what we do before a gun is bought. And these are not naive people. They think like you and I do, Christian, that it's not another freaking law that's going to make a difference. The culture needs to change. People's attitudes need to change. Values need to change. But I hear you, but I don't see that expanding background checks, for instance, means that that's going to be some panacea. I think it's okay to do that, knowing full well that may not make much of a difference at all.
Now, there's already a federal background check system for federally firearms licensed dealers. So it's been that way for a few decades now, from what I recall. So what more do you want? So I've seen people say they want.
I'd say anytime a gun is purchased and sold in any arena, that person purchasing that gun should have to undergo a background check. So you don't
even at a gun show.
Even at a gun show. Yeah. And again, Christian, I don't consider that to be some sort of attack on my constitutional rights to defend myself. Well,
let's say, there's an ethical problem. Let's say, let's just use a hypothetical example here. Let's say that I inherit the family farm, and Pop had a few carbine rifles, and upon his death, in his will, he had transferred all those rifles to me. Under the kind of regime you propose.
Regime? Would you quit saying regime? You're making me. It's so
No,
funny, Christian. You're
under
making me out to sound like I'm on the left.
no. You're not. You're a
I'm
good guy.
kidding.
You're a good guy, Jim.
I'm kidding.
Under the kind of system you propose, that transaction would require government assent. Now, I think that's
No.
egregious. No?
No. And by the way, again, stupid language, right? Universal background check. Stupid language. But every talk of expanding background checks, every potential piece of legislation that I've seen has carve outs, as they should, for familial private transactions like that. Yes.
Okay. Now, let's say I take those rifles and I go ahead and on a shooting spree and I kill people. So, I mean, there's limits.
Well, then you know what would happen, Christian? You know what would happen if you did that? Your father gave you the farm, you took those carbine rifles, and you went on a shooting spree. The next day, once we found out where those guns came from, people on the left would be demanding a new law, right, to address that.
Exactly.
And I would be standing with you in the public square, shaking my head and saying no.
Exactly.
No.
And that's the thing. So if there's whenever there's an exception for anything, because you agree with me that it'd be unethical to try to have government intrude in familial transactions, because those transactions are very intimate and very private and between two parties. Whereas you could make a case, again, I wouldn't agree. You can make a case that a gun licensed dealer is a little bit less intimate, less private. And so you could say there's more of an interest there. But
back up for a sec, Christian. I want to know if you and I are really super far apart.
Yeah.
You go into a gun dealer and buy a firearm.
Mm-hmm.
Should you have to undergo a background check in your mind?
Yes, but we already do. Now,
no, I just wanted to make sure you were okay with that.
Should between 18 and 22-year-olds be discriminated against more, which is what is being proposed right now? Because what's happening is we are saying, well, this group happens to be more violent and more immature here, therefore let's discriminate against them. No, I don't agree with that at all.
I do oppose raising the age for someone to buy a firearm, right? I like no 18 to 21-year-olds should buy an AR-15. Excuse me. No, that's not the problem. That's not the issue.
Yes. And also, I don't support background checks in every circumstance. Like I mentioned, familial transactions. If someone wants to privately give me a gun, if I know them, they're a friend, I don't think the government should come in and regulate that.
I agree. Those are important carve outs that I've seen in any potential expansion of background checks.
But there's always a risk that one of those carve outs could lead to yeah.
Hey, Christian, you're right, man. Look, those of us who believe in liberty, as I know you do and as I do, eternal vigilance, man. There's no doubt about it. I haven't changed on that. What I think is really important on this gun issue is I don't want folks on the left to dominate this debate without any of lacking all sort of the reason that you and I would bring to it, that most responsible gun owners would bring to it. I'm always amazed, Christian. I know you probably aren't. I'm always amazed. All these people who argue against guns, they really don't know the first thing about guns.
Exactly.
Right? Assault weapons. What is an AR-15? Oh, it's scary looking. It's a weapon of war.
Yeah.
They really don't. Oh, Joe, we need to get rid of automatic weapons. Hello. They don't know the first thing.
Regulated.
Yeah. So they don't know the first thing. So because this is an issue, Christian, I've been very public.
Yeah.
The most important right we have is our Second Amendment right, because I believe it defends everything else.
Yes.
But because I believe that, I think it's really important to dialogue with the other side, even if it's to help educate them.
No, I agree with dialogue. I just don't always agree with concessions. And I view red flag laws and expanded background checks as a concession. And but I do agree with dialogue. But the problem is, what I would do, I move the debate away from the legislative arena, and I go to the personal arena. And of course, they're going to think that's less tangible because progressives have this fetish for government force. They've had it since the progressive era. They believe that it can correct society's ills. And, if you follow the philosophy of William Howard Taft, they want to reinterpret the Constitution to fit their progressive aims. They have this absolute obsession with trying to force people to do what they think is best for society.
Hey,
I would
Christian,
take them away from that arena entirely. I would blow those terms up entirely. And if that
hey,
creates,
Christian,
yeah,
you're correct that the left always looks at federal government force to address problems. The problem for our country right now, which is why I left this Republican Party, is we're seeing the same thing now on this authoritarian right.
Well, this is a good segue. This is a good segue to that conversation, because I saw your tweet about the Republican Party, and you said, I think I don't have the tweet in front of me. It's like F authoritarianism, something like that. But this is not my party anymore. And that elicited a lot of backlash, so to speak. So tell me, was it Donald Trump that provoked this passion within you? Was it what was it, the January 6th event? What started your disdain for your former party?
I had always been a Republican. Because I generally believe in limited government and free markets and freedom. The Republican Party, I'm older than you, Christian. For most of my life, the Republican Party was always closer to that than the Democrat.
But by the way, just before we continue, how old am I?
I'm gonna guess, but you know what? You got that black skin, man. You don't crack. You got that black, beautiful black skin. I'm gonna guess, Christian, that you're 37.
Yikes.
Do you love me? Do you love me?
No, you are wrong. Completely off. One more guess. Lower, though. Lower.
28.
Closer. 22.
What the fuck? Christian.
Yep.
You're way younger than I thought. Not based on how you look. Just, I didn't know you were that. That's incredible, man.
Thank you.
Damn. You got me. Thank you, brother.
That's probably
yes. You are younger, Christian, than my 3 kids. Oh my God. Wow. That's awesome.
That's probably the most enthusiastic reaction I've gotten when I put someone my
that's fantastic.
I've gotten plenty of reactions.
Well, you have kind of a wiser face than a 22-year-old. I mean that as a compliment.
Thank you.
Look, no, Trump's the symptom, man. I come from the Republican Party base. I was a populist hellraiser. I still got a little bit of that in me. I knew before Trump. I know why Trump got elected.
I remember your presidential run.
Yeah, my hopeless Mission Impossible 6-month presidential run. I knew why Trump got elected, because the Republican Party base was sick and tired of an establishment that ignored him. Along came Trump and he said, I hear you. It was all bullshit. He's a liar. He's a demagogue. But I understood why he got elected. The point is, he's an authoritarian wannabe. He's a dictator wannabe. Donald Trump doesn't give a fuck about the Constitution. He doesn't give a fuck about the rule of law. But what I heard, Christian, was from his supporters, used to be my supporter, they didn't mind. They wanted kind of a strong man to kick ass. They wanted the strong man to give them the shit they wanted. There's a real authoritarian impulse in the right now that scares me. I helped to foment some of it. And we see it play out in their devotion to Trump. And by the way, DeSantis down in Florida is the same way.
Okay.
So it's no longer right now, Christian. Right now, my former party is no longer a freedom, free market, limited government party, in my mind.
Well, there is a certain push right now on the right, and this is more of a general political issue. There's a push to forsake what they call the consensus conservatism. the sort of unity between social conservatives and libertarians in the 1950s and 60s under the tutelage of William F. Buckley to fight communism and stand up for free markets and individualism. And this was the philosophy that animated Barry Goldwater and then in turn animated Ronald Reagan. There is a push right now on the right, they call themselves post-liberals, to completely shed any free market individual liberty emphasis of politics and to go more into a community collectivist based model. That there's a push. And these intellectuals that are doing this, Yoram Hazani, Patrick Deneen, all these people, Nate Hockman,
Tucker Carlson,
to an extent, yes, him too, to an extent, yeah, to an extent. I think Tucker. So yeah, here's the thing though. I think Tucker is more of a paleoconservative, more in the vein of Pat Buchanan. Not saying that's any better, but I think that it would be bad to write him off entirely. I think that he spends.
Hey, Christian, I'm not writing him off. Nobody right now, I guess next to Trump and maybe DeSantis, nobody channels the Republican Party base right now better than Tucker Carlson.
I agree. I totally
Tucker
agree.
Carlson pushes authoritarianism. Tucker Carlson pushes white supremacism.
He does. I had to push back on that one. I don't think he's a white supremacist. I don't think he is. I don't think he is.
Okay. No. I didn't say he was, but he certainly pushes white supremacism. He flirts way too much with it, my friend. Way too much with it.
So how so?
And white nationalism and nationalism.
How does he flirt with white supremacists? This is one where we're at the break. I'm not sure about that. I have seen people say the Great Replacement theory, but
I don't have a problem with that. That's both sides use that. Yeah.
Okay.
No, Tucker Carlson has had white supremacists on his show. Tucker Carlson has said nice things about white supremacism and white nationalism. And he's purposely, Christian, conflated nationalism and white nationalism way too many times. Tucker Carlson's not an idiot. Sean Hannity is an idiot. Tucker Carlson's not an idiot. Tucker knows exactly what he's doing, Christian.
Do you have an instance of him explicitly condoning white nationalism? Because I have several of him denouncing it vociferously when he was.
I do. I mean, can I rattle it off right in front of me right now? No, because I didn't know we were going to go here. But oh my God, yeah, I did. I did something on that about 4 or 5 months ago. Some of the clips where he's praised white nationalism and flirted with that line. Absolutely, yes. It's no accident.
On Fox News, on national television,
on his show, and he's had guests on, who have as well.
Now, were those guests white nationalists, white supremacists who had other views, who Carlson liked those views, or is it just more like association? Because I think what we're getting in here is a proximity problem, right? It's if there was someone who happened to be a white nationalist come on his show, that therefore makes him a white nationalist. By that standard, CNN's a white nationalist organization because they had Richard Spencer on their show. They had him on.
I don't mean that. I mean that Tucker Carlson, I think you'd agree with me, Tucker Carlson preaches a nationalist philosophy.
Sure, but there's a very big difference between nationalism and white nationalism.
Exactly. But among many, there isn't that difference, which is why I said a moment ago that Tucker has very expertly conflated nationalism and white nationalism. I oppose both, but Tucker knows there's a blurry line there. And he's kind of danced around that line way too many times, in my opinion. And he's no dummy, and he knows what he's doing. But regardless, you and I could fight on that. I think Tucker pushes authoritarianism. His love for Orban, his love for strongmen. That's no accident.
Well, no, I think
I used to know Tucker way back in the day. Tucker said he was libertarian back then, like I am.
He used to be a Cato guy, right? He used to be a Cato guy. He used to be very active in libertarian politics. Now he's changed, and I have been sorely disappointed in the changes he's made to his political philosophy. He one time said the Koch brothers run Washington, D.C. I wish that were true. I genuinely do wish that were true. Maybe you don't. I don't know, but I wish that were true.
No, I love the Koch brothers.
I think Charles Cook has done a lot of good for this world. So
Good.
I wish he ran Washington, D.C. We would see a lot less nonsense if he did. But no, I think Carlson's project is really concerning. I just think the problem.
But Christian, the important point for us is that's where today's Republican Party is. That's where the typical Republican voter is.
Nationalism?
The typical Republican. Oh, yeah. Look, man, the typical Republican voter is not a free market, free trade, limited government, welcome our arms to legal immigrants, right? Today's Republican Party is not about that at all. It is authoritarian. And I get it. I get it, Christian, because these people used to be my people. They in essence, in many ways, they've given up on democracy to give them back the America they want. And they feel beaten down because the left dominates academia, the left dominates popular culture, dominates, the media. And they want, if we can have a real strong dictator who can just forget about democracy, who can strongman our way back to what we want it.
I get what you're saying, and I think a lot of it has truth to it, definitely. Where I would disagree is the assertion that the average Republican voter does not value liberty. I don't think the average political voter of either party understands the fundamentals of their respective political ideologies. The Republican Party is a consortium of millions of people of different backgrounds, values, and opinions who believe that this structure can go ahead and forward them in the best way. And all of them have different motivations. Even the average voter has different motivations than the other. And so if you were to go to a Trump rally and survey, I don't know, 50 people, you may get 50 different answers on certain issues. If you would go to a Trump rally and survey like 50 people on gay marriage, you may get one person who personally opposes it but doesn't want the government involved. You may get another person who opposes it both legally and morally. You may get several different answers. There's many more shades than I think a lot of people want to admit. People look at Marjorie Taylor Greene, who, by the way, also pays a lot of lip service towards liberty as well, or Lauren Boebert, who probably exemplifies the sort of more radical idea of liberty in many instances, like on guns and on bodily autonomy with vaccines. And they overshadow all of that for their more bombastic rhetoric and say, okay, this is where you guys have gone. I don't think that's the case. Just like I don't think most Democrats are Bernie Sanders socialists, because most of them are not. The younger faction of them, most of them are not. Most of them are much more in the camp Joe Biden's in, if a little bit more to the left than that. Most of them, I mean, you don't have a party structure that embraced Hillary Clinton, that embraced Joe Biden a few years apart, that is socialist. You don't have that. Socialists hate both Biden and Clinton. They think that they're both neoliberals and that they're just terrible. So I think that we have to be very careful in saying the average voter, because there's a lot of, Trump brought a lot of folks into the party who really are not the kind of people you'll see at Oxford talking about political theory, who don't, like most people in America have a understanding of the fundamentals. They just know where they stand. They want their guns. They want to praise God. They don't want to be forced to take something that they didn't consent to. They want a strong border. They just know positions. They don't know general value systems. Orban knows value systems. Putin knows value systems. They are very smart men who know which direction they want society to proceed in. The average American voter does not. It doesn't mean they're stupid. It just means they're practical. So that's the problem I have with your analysis.
No, I agree with that when it comes to the average voter. But the typical Republican voter right now, the engaged Republican voter, what we call the base. The Democratic Party has a base. The Republican Party has a base. These are the most committed, active voters in under each tent. These folks, by and large, are more authoritarian than conservative. Based on, I engage, Christian, with hundreds of them a day. I've been doing it for 10
Yeah.
years because
I don't doubt your experience. I don't doubt your experience at all.
I come from them.
Yeah.
And I still engage with them every day because they consider me to be a traitor. They tell me in so many words every fucking day, I got no problem if DeSantis or Trump break the law, as long as they're going to do something about CNN or whatever, as long as they're going to do something about what those crazy professors are teaching my kids in college. They want that. They want government. They want to use the power of government to balance things.
And there is that is a strain that exists in the Republican Party right now.
And I'd say it's the dominant strain. If you are a Republican candidate, Christian, and you come along like I do, and you advocate freedom, free markets, free trade, limited government, let's expand legal immigration, you have no place right now. You would not succeed as a Republican.
Well, Joe, if I may be frank with you, respectfully,
Frank,
maybe frank with you, I don't think your problem was your libertarianism. Mike Lee and Rand Paul make the libertarianism work in this current environment. I think your problem was your I think your problem was your overt opposition towards Trump. Just like Kinzinger, just like Cheney, that was your problem. That was the problem.
Christian, I agree. If you are a public opponent of Trump, like I am, you have no place in this party. Oh, completely. Look, most Republicans just kept their mouths shut. Most Republicans think about Trump like I do. They're just afraid to say anything. Mike Lee used to be my best friend. Rand Paul, I voted for him in 2016. They made their deal. They know who Trump is. And they enable him. They've decided to enable him. They've decided to keep quiet. And they've decided to get whatever kind of libertarian victories they can get. But they've learned to play the game with Trump, to stay in the game. I agree with that. Liz Cheney's going to lose in a month. Adam Kinzinger didn't run because he knew he couldn't win.
Yeah. Now, if Kinzinger and Cheney had just opposed Trump, if that was their only offense, they would still be in a bad spot. But the thing is, they have gone above and beyond. Cheney has made it almost her entire the status of her entire political career to attack Trump and to paint people who support him as radicals, as has Kinzinger. They are essentially being smear merchants, and that's why I'm not a very big fan of either.
Well, I'll put a different spin on it, my friend. And remember, Cheney and Kinzinger voted for Trump in 2020.
Yeah.
So after 4 years of this guy abusing the rule of law, they still voted for him. And it was only January 6th that turned them. Yeah. And in their defense, you can disagree. I agree with them. January 6th was a violent attempt to overturn an American election, all led by the biggest poor loser in American history. That's a big deal. And you may disagree with their view, but that's why Cheney and Kinzinger, Cheney is so strident on what happened.
Right. Yeah, I think that there's a lot of narrative around the 6th, particularly as it relates to the protesters, that is very concerning. That is not necessarily the entire truth. I do agree that Trump did try to use legislative process to contest the results of the election. He absolutely did that. And he wanted Mike Pence to go ahead and finalize that. But did Trump, as Cheney said so lovingly a week or so ago in the committee, did Trump go ahead and order a mob to storm the Capitol? I don't see any evidence of that. Now, you could say that he wink, nudged, but I don't. That's a more of a subjective thing. But what he did say is go protest this election peacefully at the Capitol. And there were a lot of people who were at the foot of the Capitol who were doing nothing more than screaming. Then there was and I was watching it live, there were a group of people at the doors, smashing the windows, who banged on the doors. Some people say that the cops let them in. I don't know, but I know that the doors eventually opened and gave way. People stormed in. And then there are people like that elderly lady who just got arrested for 60 days, who just walked into the Capitol after the doors were already open and waved a flag. And they're being considered terrorists. I hope you would agree, Joe, that not everyone who was being charged for what happened on the 6th was a part of any terrorism or vandalism. Some folks were just bystanders. In fact, a lot of folks are just bystanders, and they're being interred right now in deplorable conditions.
There were some 30,000 people that came to DC that day to rally with Trump.
Yeah.
The vast majority of them just came to rally. They're peaceful Americans exercising their First Amendment rights. The people who stormed at the Capitol and broke into the Capitol had different intentions. That was a sliver of that 35,000. But to me, it's much bigger and much broader than what happened that day and what Trump said that day. Donald Trump began lying about that 2020 election before the election. I mean, I was on the radio in 2020. It was in June of 2020 when Donald Trump first said, one of two things is going to happen. Either I'm going to win or it's going to be stolen from me. Donald Trump, I believe, Christian, purposely planted that seed, the rigged, stolen election seed, because if he lost, he did want there to be violence and chaos. That's un-American, man.
Well, I understand your position. I understand. I don't entirely agree. I don't think he wanted there to be chaos, but I understand where you're coming from. I do. And I'm not a Trump apologist personally. I have mixed feelings about him. I think he did some good things. Did some things I didn't agree with, like most presidents. But I just wanted, I just like to approach these things from as a dispassionate place as I can. But I understand that you are very stalwart in your beliefs and your opinions on this, and I respect that sincerely. You have courage.
Well, and Christian, understand, man, it hasn't done me any good.
Right,
I'd be a lot better off. I'd have still have my nationally syndicated radio show. I'd be on Fox News. I'd be probably running for Congress again if I had just gotten in line like Mike Lee and Rand Paul and just kind of kept quiet about Trump. No doubt life would be a lot better. I just couldn't do that.
So what's next for you? What's next for Joe Walsh? Where does he go from here?
I don't know. I think something new is coming, Christian. I think this Republican Party is shrinking. I think the Democratic Party is becoming more leftist. And I think for a principled libertarian conservative like me, there are a lot of people like me. I really think there could be a new political party coming one day soon. And I hope to be involved in that so that the American people have another voice.
All right. Well, it's very, and there are a lot of people who want a third party and things of that sort. Personally, I don't align with party. I don't have any party affiliation. I support whatever policies I think best further the moral order of our Constitution, wherever they may be. Now, just so happens that most of those policies are not coming from the left.
And increasingly, they're not coming from the right either.
There's a factional. There's a fact.
One other thing, Christian, I agree in that I think what you might see these next few cycles is more independents getting elected each cycle. I could see doing that. I consider myself an independent now.
Maybe you could see another Ross Perot, perhaps a more effective Ross Perot who has better values.
Yes.
I mean, because the Reform Party, I'm sure you remember, you were around back then, that they really captured a moment in American political history. You had Jesse Ventura, even Donald Trump was a part of the Reform Party and ran for president. People don't realize that he ran for president in the early 2000s on the Reform Party ticket. That was really a moment in political history that shook things because it broke the dichotomy, broke the two-party dichotomy. And so you just have to have another person, do that. And probably it would cost a lot of money. It would be a lot of work, a lot of operations, but it'd be very interesting to see.
I think we're at a moment like that again.
Yeah, you think so? Interesting.
I do.
Interesting.
Look, if we're looking at a Biden-Trump matchup in 24, how gross is that? That may be kind of the final push for somebody to say, we need something a little different.
Interesting. Well, thank you so much for spending some time with me,
Christian,
Joe.
you're the best, man. I love this.
No, yeah, no, you were a great guest. I hope that I can have you back sometime in the future when time permits.
Hey, you know what? All you have to do is ask.
Oh, that's awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much, Joe, and everybody else. Please stay pensive. Bye, guys.
Thanks, Chris.